Okay, so let's talk about the first use case. First use case is an internal user, and we're going to talk about traditional Citrix deployment. So this is typically end users going to Storefront, leveraging either the Workspace app or using a common browser. At that point, they would get directed to the URL, and because Storefront is configured to use Viridium, which in this case, Viridium have built their own API using the Citrix Storefront SDK, this enables us to then talk directly to the Viridium ID server.
So what happens now, based on entering my username into the Storefront site, that information is pushed through the API, as Craig just mentioned, through to our Viridium ID server. And then based on the username, we will send a push notification via APNS, Apple Push Notification Server, or indeed Google Firebase, down to the mobile phone where that user account is enrolled. You'll notice here, as I click login, the push notification arrives, and we then perform a biometric check on the user to make sure that the user who's using the phone can validate their fingerprint or their face, or indeed if you're using the Viridium software biometric, their full finger, touchless ID technology, or Viridium face. We do a biometric check of some description on the user. We then push that acknowledgement back through the API from the Viridium ID server back to the Storefront site.
So now what happens is Storefront will talk back to the backends of your Zen app or virtual apps and desktops workloads, and will enumerate all the resources that the user has access to. So now they can launch the applications. Now, when you launch Windows workloads, there are two ways of doing this. The first one is using username and password, but of course we're talking about removing passwords from the user. So let's talk about the second use case, and that's where we're using certificates in the user session where we can essentially remove the passwords. And to do that, we leverage the Citrix Federated Authentication Service.
And the architecture remains identical even for external access. The only additional component that we would typically add in for Citrix customers for a secure external access is a NetScaler gateway. So rather than Workspace app talk directly to Storefront, Workspace app would talk to NetScaler gateway. And rather than leveraging the API integration between Storefront and the Viridium ID server, we configure NetScaler gateway to talk to Viridium ID server through the Radius protocol. Steps 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 remain identical both for internal and external use cases.